Lyra had always known she was different, though she had never allowed herself to hope that difference would matter. In her colony, perfection was measured in strength, in endurance, in the ability to carry burdens without complaint. Those who could not meet the expectations of their families and society were quietly, and sometimes cruelly, cast aside. Lyra's body had never been strong. Even as a child, her hands had trembled when holding heavy tools, and her legs had grown tired faster than those of other children. But her mind had always been sharp, curious, and unyielding. She could solve problems, navigate systems, and think ahead in ways that others could not. In a world obsessed with physical strength, though, none of that seemed to matter. The morning that changed her life began with a council meeting she had feared for years. The colony leaders had gathered in the central hall, a cold place of polished metal and harsh fluorescent light. Her parents stood at the front, faces stern and unsmiling, alongside the medical council. The verdict had already been whispered for months among the colony workers and neighbors. Lyra was unfit for marriage. In their eyes, her rare condition, a combination of weakness in her bones and a fragile immune system, made her incapable of fulfilling the roles expected of a woman in the colony. Lyra stood silently as the council spoke. She had expected disappointment, perhaps even pity, but not the quiet cruelty in her father's voice when he said her name aloud. "We cannot allow someone with such fragility to bear the responsibilities of family life," he said. "Lyra, you have become a burden to your family and to this colony. You will be left on Outpost Theta 7. There you will live as long as you can, and we will consider your obligations concluded." Lyra's heart stuttered. Her mother's eyes were dry, empty of the warmth she had once known. No one said goodbye. No one offered a hand. She was simply left with a pack, a few days' worth of rations, and a transport shuttle that would deposit her on the harsh fringe of the colony's territory. The shuttle ride was silent, the hum of engines and the low vibration of the hull filling the void where words might have been. Lyra stared at the frozen expanse outside, the dark, rocky terrain stretching endlessly, broken only by jagged cliffs and deep chasms. It was a desolate place, meant for mining and research, not human habitation. A place where the weak went to disappear. When she landed, the shuttle's engines cut out, leaving her alone in an empty landing bay. The wind whipped across the barren plains, biting through the thin fabric of her suit. The temperature dropped sharply as the day faded, the sun sinking below the distant, jagged horizon. She tried to steady her breathing, to focus on survival, but the truth was clear. She had been abandoned, left to die. Lyra spent the first hours huddled inside a small, abandoned mining cabin. The walls were cold metal, rusting in places, but they offered protection from the wind. She examined her supplies, rations for 3 days, a basic medical kit, a small generator, and a communicator that no longer seemed to function properly. The thought of rationing her energy and food filled her with both dread and determination. She would not let them see her die. Not here. Not like this. The first night was the hardest. The wind howled like a living thing, bending the metal walls of the cabin, rattling her fragile shelter. Shadows stretched across the floor as the dim light of distant stars fell through cracks in the walls. Lyra wrapped herself tightly in a thermal blanket, feeling the cold seep into her bones despite her best efforts. Sleep came in fits, haunted by visions of her family turning away and leaving her behind. But even in the darkness, a small ember of resolve burned inside her. She would survive. Somehow, she would survive. By the second day, Lyra had begun to explore her surroundings. She moved carefully across the frozen plains, testing the terrain, identifying possible sources of water, and scanning for shelter or threats. Her body ached with every step, muscles trembling from fatigue, but her mind remained alert. She had always believed that the mind could outlast the body, that cunning and ingenuity could compensate for physical weakness, and now it would have to. It was during this exploration that she first noticed signs of movement. shapes moving in the distance that were not rocks or shadows. At first she thought it might be wind, dust, or hallucination born of hunger and exhaustion. But the shapes grew clearer, small, scavenger-like creatures native to the fringe planets, drawn to anything that might provide food. Lyra froze, assessing the creatures carefully. They were fast, aggressive, and dangerous if cornered. She backed away slowly, retracing her steps to the cabin. Inside, she began to strategize. Her weakness was obvious, but she had tools and intelligence. She rigged a basic alarm system using motion sensors from abandoned equipment, set traps with weighted cables, and prepared a rudimentary defense with sharpened metal rods. She was still small and weak, but she had foresight, and that could be enough. By the third day, hunger and thirst were beginning to gnaw at her. The rations were low, the generator fuel dwindling, and the communicator remained silent. Panic threatened to take hold, but she forced it down. Survival required calm, methodical thinking. She broke down the landscape around her, identifying a nearby ice cavern that might provide water and shelter. Slipping into the cavern, she used her suit's melting system to extract water from the ice, replenishing her stores. Small victories bolstered her resolve. Yet the dangers were unrelenting. During the fourth day, a sudden storm swept across the plains, fierce winds and electrical discharges forcing her to take cover in the cavern for nearly 24 hours. She huddled in a narrow crevice, shivering, listening to the storm batter the planet. In those moments, she realized the sheer scale of the challenge before her. Her body was weak, yes, but her mind could think, plan, and endure where others might falter. And she would endure. Night brought another threat. Cold, oppressive darkness. She wrapped herself in layers, built a fire from scraps of mining equipment, and kept her senses sharp. She felt something watching her. Shadows moving at the edges of her vision. The scavengers had returned. They were clever, waiting for mistakes. She waited for the right moment, then triggered her traps. One of the creatures fell into a pit she had concealed with debris. Others scattered into the night. She felt a grim satisfaction. Survival was possible, but it required constant vigilance. On the fifth day, just as her hope began to waver under the weight of isolation and hunger, she heard a sound that made her heart leap, something she had not heard in days. A low hum, mechanical and deliberate, growing steadily closer. Lyra froze, unsure if it was a rescue team or another threat. She considered hiding, but her instincts told her to observe. Through the swirling dust and wind, a figure emerged, tall, imposing, clad in advanced combat armor. He moved with purpose, scanning the area with practiced efficiency. Her first thought was fear. He could be a scavenger, an alien, or worse. But as he drew closer, his voice came through a small speaker in the suit. "Are you alive?" Lyra's response was cautious, trembling. I think so." The figure approached carefully, scanning her vitals. He did not flinch at her weakness or her exhausted state. Instead, he knelt, placing a gloved hand gently under her arm. "You're not supposed to be here," he said quietly. "Come with me." "I'll get you to safety." Lyra's mind reeled. Safety? Rescue? After days of abandonment, after the bitter sting of betrayal, she could scarcely believe it. But the soldier's eyes were steady, full of a quiet determination that mirrored her own. He did not hesitate. He offered her a hand, and she took it, clinging to the first sign of humanity she had felt since she had been left alone. As he lifted her, she realized something profound. Survival was no longer just about enduring the planet's harshness. It was about trust, about connection, about the unexpected kindness of another human. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to hope. The soldier carried her across the frozen plains, moving with careful strength. The wind bit at their faces, the jagged rocks threatened to trip them at every step. but he did not falter. Lyra rested against him, her body weak, but her mind alert, absorbing every detail of her rescuer, every motion, every sound. She had been abandoned by those who should have protected her, but now she had a chance to survive, not alone, but with someone who believed in her humanity. Night fell again, and the stars stretched above them, endless and indifferent. But for the first time, Lyra felt a spark of warmth. Somewhere in the darkness, humanity persisted, and perhaps, if she could hold on, she would be able to rise beyond the limits others had imposed on her. The wind howled, the cold threatened, and danger lingered in every shadow. But in the arms of the soldier who had found her, Lyra understood one thing clearly. She had been given a second chance, and she would not waste it. As the night deepened and the frozen plains stretched endlessly around them, Lyra clung to the thought that perhaps against impossible odds, humans could endure anything. And she intended to prove it. The first light of the planet's pale sun broke over the jagged horizon, casting long shadows across the frozen plains. Lyra woke slowly, shivering despite the warmth of the soldier's cloak draped around her shoulders. She blinked at the dim glow filtering through the thin visor of her suit and realized she had slept without fear for the first time in days. The presence of the soldier, Elias Kane, she had learned his name from the soft words he had spoken during the night, was a strange comfort. He sat beside her, scanning the horizon with practiced attention, the faint hum of his equipment filling the quiet. "You'll need to keep moving soon," he said, his voice calm but firm. "The plains may seem empty, but they are not safe. Storms, predators, or malfunctioning mining bots could appear without warning." Lyra struggled to her feet, feeling the ache of muscles she had pushed beyond their limits. "I can walk," she said, her voice weak but determined. "I need to learn to move better." Kane studied her for a long moment. His eyes were sharp, trained from years of combat and survival, but there was no judgment in them. "We'll move slowly. You'll follow my lead. If you falter, I'll catch you." As they left the temporary shelter of the cavern, the wind bit at their faces, whipping across the plains with surprising force. Lyra stumbled several times, her legs trembling, but Kane was always there, steadying her, guiding her through the treacherous landscape. It was exhausting work. But Lyra discovered something unexpected. Her mind began to work faster, compensating for her weakness. She spotted patterns in the terrain, routes that offered shelter from the wind, and areas where the ice was strong enough to walk on safely. By mid-morning, they encountered the first real test. A pack of scavenger creatures, larger and more aggressive than the ones she had trapped near the cabin, emerged from the shadows. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, and their movements were swift and predatory. Kane's hand went to a sidearm, but he paused when he noticed Lyra's gaze scanning the ground. "Wait," she whispered. "We can use the terrain." "Huh. Lead them over the ridges. They can't climb like we can." Kane raised an eyebrow, but nodded. He moved with her instructions, carefully guiding the creatures along a narrow path between icy cliffs. As predicted, several of them lost footing and tumbled down the slopes. Others hesitated, confused by the shifting landscape. Lyra felt a thrill of triumph. Her body might be weak, but her mind had saved them both. "You're better at this than you think," Kane said as the last creature fled. "Brains over brawn, huh?" Lyra smiled faintly, tired but pleased. "I guess so." "I had to be." Their journey continued across jagged ice fields and barren valleys. Kane carried Lyra when the terrain became too dangerous, but she insisted on walking whenever she could. She began to notice details others might miss, subtle signs of water beneath frozen ice, faint tracks indicating the presence of dangerous predators, and even malfunctioning mining bots left abandoned during the colony's expansion. She started marking these hazards in her memory, guiding Kane safely around them. The nights remained cruel. Temperatures plummeted, and the wind cut through their layers like knives. Kane built small, portable shelters when necessary, teaching Lyra how to conserve heat, manage her energy, and protect herself from frostbite. Each lesson strengthened her resolve. Every small victory reminded her that she was not helpless. She was learning, adapting, surviving, and she was no longer alone. On the 7th day, their journey brought them to the edge of a deep canyon. A thin, ice-covered bridge stretched across it, jagged and treacherous. Kane assessed it first, testing the surface with a cautious step. Lyra studied the bridge as well, noticing weak points, cracks hidden under frost. "We'll go one at a time," Kane said. "I'll go first, then you follow carefully, step where I step." Lyra nodded, heart pounding as Kane crossed with steady steps. When it was her turn, she moved slowly, placing each foot with care, her hands occasionally brushing the metal rails Kane had left as support. Halfway across, a gust of wind shook the bridge, threatening to throw her off balance. Fear surged, but she remembered every lesson Kane had given her. Calm, steady breathing, careful observation, and confidence in one's mind and instincts. She reached the other side safely, the rush of relief and triumph leaving her momentarily breathless. "See?" Kane said, smiling. "You're stronger than you think." Lyra could only nod, exhausted but proud. For the first time, she felt capable in ways her colony had never acknowledged. Strength came in many forms. Sometimes it was muscle, sometimes it was courage, and sometimes it was the ability to think ahead and survive against all odds. As they set up camp that night, Lyra noticed something strange. Small lights flickered in the distance. Alien technology, she realized with a thrill and a shiver. Not scavengers, not wildlife, but something intelligent. Kane noticed her hesitation. "Those are probably survey drones," he said. "They scan for heat, movement, and trespassers. If they see us, we could be in serious trouble." Lyra's mind raced. She had studied similar drones during her childhood, fascinated by machines and systems. "We can avoid them," she said. "I can hack their frequency, confuse their sensors for a short time. We can slip past unnoticed." Kane blinked, surprised. "You can do that?" "I've studied it," she admitted. "I've practiced." Together they moved carefully toward the lights, Lyra guiding Kane with instructions. She adjusted frequencies, sending subtle signals to disrupt the drone's patrols. The lights flickered and shifted, leaving small gaps in their coverage. With patience and precision, they moved across the field without triggering an alarm. Kane glanced at her in awe. "You're incredible," he said quietly. "I underestimated you." Lyra shrugged, a small smile playing on her lips. "You'll get used to underestimating humans like me. We have ways to survive." The following days were a mix of exhaustion, discovery, and danger. Lyra continued to demonstrate skills that surprised Kane. She could read alien topography, predict weather changes from subtle cues, and even use the landscape to hide from potential predators. Each success strengthened her confidence, while Kane provided the physical support she still needed. Together they were a team, each compensating for the other's weaknesses. On the 10th day, the most dangerous challenge yet appeared. A sudden quake in the frozen plain split the ground beneath them. Jagged fissures opened, threatening to swallow them whole. Kane reacted instinctively, pulling Lyra to safety, but she quickly assessed the situation and identified a safer route over the unstable ice. "This way," she said, pointing to a narrow path over a ridge. "We can cross before it collapses further." Kane hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Trust me," she replied, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. She led him over the ridge, carefully stepping on solid ice while avoiding cracks. The fissures shifted and groaned beneath their weight, but her observation and reasoning allowed them to cross safely. Kane shook his head in disbelief. "Every day you amaze me. You're rewriting what I thought I knew about humans." Lyra laughed softly, though it was weary.
"We're more adaptable than anyone gives us credit for." By the 12th day, they had begun to approach the outskirts of a minor human settlement.
Kane signaled cautiously, checking for patrols and security drones. Lyra's eyes scanned the terrain, picking out hidden paths and alternative routes. Her body was tired, but her mind was sharper than ever. They had survived storms, creatures, terrain, and isolation. Lyra had discovered hidden strength, intelligence, and courage she had never realized she possessed, and Kane had seen firsthand what humanity could endure, adapt to, and overcome when faced with impossible odds. As they neared the settlement, however, a new realization struck Lyra. Her journey was far from over. The council that had abandoned her would not simply welcome her back. They would see her as a threat, a challenge to their authority. And yet, she felt something that had been missing for so long. Hope. Hope that she could prove her worth, not as a burden or a failure, but as a human capable of endurance, intelligence, and bravery. Night fell once more, and the lights of the settlement flickered in the distance. Kane set up a small shelter on a ridge overlooking the area, keeping them hidden from casual observers. Lyra huddled beside him, listening to the hum of his equipment and the faint sounds of life from below. She felt an unfamiliar sense of safety, tempered by awareness of the challenges ahead. "You ready?" Kane said suddenly, breaking the quiet. "Ready to face whatever comes next? Not just survive, but confront the people who left you behind." Lyra looked at him, her mind racing. She had learned much about survival, about courage, about what it meant to be human. But she also knew that survival was only part of the story. To reclaim her life, she would need to fight in ways she had never imagined, not with fists or weapons, but with intellect, strategy, and unwavering courage. And for the first time in her life, she felt prepared. As they watched the settlement below, shadows of patrol drones flickering across the buildings, Lyra realized the truth that had been hidden from her all these years. The human spirit could endure, adapt, and rise above any challenge. No matter how weak she had seemed, no matter how her family had judged her, she had proven her strength. And soon, she would show the world that the measure of a human was not in muscle or health, but in heart, mind, and will. The night was cold, the wind relentless, but Lyra felt something stronger than fear. She felt determination. Somewhere in the darkness, survival had turned into purpose, and together, she and Kane would see it through. The settlement rose like a small oasis in the frozen plains, a cluster of metal and concrete buildings, surrounded by a perimeter of surveillance drones and watchtowers. Lyra's eyes scanned the structures from their hidden ridge. It was bustling with human activity, but the order of it seemed rigid, cold, and unforgiving. Every movement, every gesture of the colonists seemed dictated by rules that she had been judged to fail. She felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. Kane crouched beside her. "We'll move at night. Fewer eyes, fewer drones. You stick close, follow my lead, and nothing will happen you can't handle." Lyra nodded. Her legs were tired, her body still weak from days of survival, but her mind was sharper than ever. Every lesson she had learned on the plains, the observation, the patience, the anticipation, had brought her to this point, and now it would be tested against humans, the very people who had abandoned her. They waited for darkness, crouched in the shadow of the ridge. The settlement lights glimmered below, drones humming as they moved in organized patterns. When the streets were momentarily clear, Kane led the way, Lyra following, stepping carefully along shadowed paths and alleyways. Her first test came almost immediately. A patrol drone, larger than any they had encountered outside the settlement, turned a corner and nearly spotted them. Lyra froze, her mind racing. She remembered the systems she had studied as a child, how frequencies could be disrupted and signals confused. With a soft, calculated movement, she manipulated a small device Kane had given her, sending a subtle pulse that made the drone's sensors flicker. It hesitated, then moved on without detecting them. Kane glanced at her, impressed. "I keep underestimating you," he said quietly. Lyra's lips curved in a small, exhausted smile. That won't happen again. The settlement itself was more dangerous than the frozen plains had ever been. Every alley had watchful eyes, every building a potential trap. But Lyra's mind thrived under pressure. She noted escape routes, weak points in the patrol routes, and quiet spaces where they could rest if necessary. Kane carried her over particularly dangerous areas, but mostly she moved on her own, proving that her perceived weakness was far from her reality. By the time they reached the Central District, the core of the colony's governance, Lyra felt a mixture of fear and determination. Ahead of them loomed the council's building, a tall, imposing structure of polished metal and reinforced glass. The doors bore the insignia of authority and judgment, the very authority that had cast her aside as unfit. Kane stopped outside the building. "This is it. After this, it's not just about survival. It's about truth. You're ready." Lyra drew a deep breath, the cold night air filling her lungs. "I'm ready," she whispered. They entered through a service entrance Kane had identified, a narrow passage that bypassed the main doors and security checkpoints. Inside, the building was stark and quiet. Lyra's footsteps echoed against the metal floors as she followed Kane through hallways lined with offices, data panels, and locked doors. Every step brought a surge of memories: the council's cold dismissal, her family's empty gaze, the long days of survival on the plains. When they reached the main chamber, the council was in session. The room was illuminated by harsh lights, council members seated in elevated chairs, their expressions severe and expectant. They froze as Kane and Lyra appeared, and murmurs spread through the chamber. "Lyra," one council member began, her voice sharp, "you were declared unfit. You were left to die." "How?" "I survived," Lyra said firmly, stepping forward. Her voice, though not loud, carried a clarity and strength that filled the room. "Not just because I endured the planet, not just because I was lucky. I survived because humans are adaptable, because we can think, plan, and rise above limitations others impose on us." The room was silent. Kane stood beside her, unwavering. He had seen her strength firsthand. He knew the truth in her words. One council member, a tall man with cold eyes, leaned forward. "You were abandoned because you could not meet expectations. You are still weak. How do you justify your actions now?" Lyra held his gaze. "You judged me by strength of body alone."
"You ignored mind, courage, and resilience. I am weak in ways you consider important. Yes."
"But I have survived when your measures said I would fail. I have adapted when others could not. I have faced dangers that would have killed anyone you considered strong. And I am here. Not because of luck, but because of determination, intelligence, and human spirit." Murmurs spread across the chamber. Some council members looked uneasy, their authority challenged not by rebellion, but by undeniable truth. Lyra continued, her words gaining confidence with each breath. "I learned things the colony refused to teach me. I navigated treacherous terrain, avoided predators, and outsmarted machines designed to detect me. I survived storms, isolation, and injury, and I did it not as someone weak, but as a human, someone capable of rising beyond expectations." One member scoffed, trying to regain control. "And you expect us to accept this? That your survival somehow proves superiority over those who followed the rules?" Lyra shook her head. "No, I do not claim superiority. I claim recognition of the truth. Strength is not just muscle or health. Strength is thought, courage, resilience, and compassion. I have shown all of these, and if that is not enough, then the colony itself is wrong in how it measures value." Kane stepped forward, his voice deep and unwavering. "She speaks the truth. I have seen it with my own eyes. Humanity is defined not by physical perfection, but by will, intelligence, and heart. Lyra embodies those qualities. You abandoned her, and yet she survived. That proves more than any decree ever could. For a moment, silence dominated the chamber. Even the murmurs ceased. The council had not expected this confrontation. They had not expected evidence so direct, so undeniable. Lyra's presence, combined with Kane's testimony, challenged the very foundation of their authority. One member finally spoke, voice tight. "And what do you intend to do now, Lyra? Will you accept your place weak as it is, or will you challenge the system?" Lyra's eyes flashed with determination. "I will challenge the system. Not out of anger, but to show what humans can achieve when allowed to survive and thrive." "I will not be defined by weakness or prejudice. I will be defined by what I can do, and what I will do to survive, to help others, and to advance humanity." Another council member, older and quieter, spoke next, voice trembling slightly. "And Kane, you support this?" Kane nodded. Every word, humans endure. Humans adapt. Humans rise above limits others impose.
Lyra is a testament to that. She deserves recognition, not abandonment.
The tension in the chamber was palpable. Some council members looked ready to argue. Others seemed to hesitate, unsure how to respond. Outside the chamber, colonists had begun to gather, drawn by rumors of Lyra's survival and the confrontation. Word spread quickly. The girl they had left to die had returned, stronger than anyone expected. Lyra's heart pounded, not from fear, but from a sense of purpose she had never felt before. She had faced storms, predators, isolation, and now the council itself. Every challenge had tested her, but she had survived and learned. Her mind was sharp, her skills growing daily, and her resolve unbreakable. She was no longer simply a survivor. She was a force that demanded recognition. The council, sensing the shift in public opinion and the undeniable truth of Kane's testimony, hesitated. Their authority, once absolute, felt fragile in the presence of undeniable evidence. The murmurs of the colonists outside grew louder, a wave of support building beyond the walls. Lyra turned to Kane, her eyes steady. "We've shown them the truth, but this is only the beginning. They can try to stop me, to control me, but they cannot stop what humans are capable of when we refuse to accept limitations imposed by fear or ignorance."
Kane nodded. "They can try, but they will see."
Humans endure. Humans rise. And you are living proof. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt a sense of belonging. Not in a family that had rejected her, but in the broader human spirit. Humanity itself, flawed yet brilliant, capable of resilience and ingenuity, had guided her through the worst. She had been abandoned, yes, but the very qualities that others had dismissed had allowed her to survive and thrive. Outside the chamber, colonists whispered and pointed, some in awe, some in doubt, but all watching. The story of the unfit girl who had survived the fringe planet was spreading fast. The council could try to deny it, suppress it, or punish it, but the truth had a way of shining through, and Lyra was its brightest beacon. As the night stretched on, Lyra and Kane remained in the chamber, standing firm. They had faced the council, challenged prejudice, and proven that humanity could not be measured by weakness alone. Lyra's mind, courage, and adaptability had turned her from a discarded outcast into a symbol of human resilience. And though the council might resist, the colony, and perhaps even the galaxy, would remember. Lyra's journey was far from over. Challenges still awaited beyond the settlement, and greater tests would come. But for the first time, she knew she had the strength, the mind, and the will to face whatever lay ahead. She was no longer defined by weakness, fear, or abandonment. She was defined by humanity itself and the potential it held. Kane placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Tomorrow we plan the next step. They've seen your strength, but You'll need to guide them further. They need to understand what humans can endure. Lyra nodded, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration.
We'll show them, and then
we'll rise beyond what they ever imagined. Outside, the first signs of dawn touched the sky, washing the settlement in a faint glow. Lyra felt the warmth in her chest, a reminder that survival was only the beginning. Humanity's true strength, the resilience and ingenuity that had carried them across the stars, was something no counsel, no prejudice, and no weakness could deny, and she would prove it, one step at a time. The council chamber felt colder than ever that morning. Sunlight reflected off polished metal walls, bouncing harsh light across the faces of council members who had spent the night restless, whispering among themselves. They had not forgotten the confrontation the previous night. The colonists' murmurs outside still echoed in the corridors, a subtle reminder that Lyra's return had changed something fundamental. Authority was fragile, when the truth was undeniable. Lyra and Kane entered the chamber, their steps deliberate, measured. Kane's presence was solid, protective, a reminder to both her and the council that she was not alone. Lyra walked with a new confidence. Every step a declaration. She had survived, she had learned, and she was no longer weak. Her father's face was pale, his lips pressed in a tight line. Her mother sat silently, hands folded, eyes filled with shame and worry. They had expected fear, perhaps tears, but not this composed determination. Lyra met their gaze steadily. The council members, too, looked wary. This was no longer a frightened girl pleading for mercy. This was someone who had faced death, isolation, and betrayal, and had emerged stronger for it. "You return?" her father said, his voice wavering slightly. "After everything, you return?"
"Yes," Lyra replied evenly. "But—"
"I return, and I am not the person you abandoned. I survived when you left me to die. I adapted when you assumed I could not. And I am here to show the truth about what humans are capable of." The council murmured, but one member, a stern woman with silver hair, spoke directly. "You survived on your own, yes. But survival alone does not challenge our judgment. Your body is still weak. How can you possibly claim to be an example of human strength?" Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in controlled focus. "Strength is not only measured in muscle. You have seen my endurance, my intellect, and my courage. I have navigated frozen plains, survived storms, outsmarted predators and malfunctioning machines. I have done what you said was impossible. That is human strength. I have seen her skill and ingenuity firsthand. She is not weak. She represents the qualities that allow humanity to survive across the stars. Courage, intelligence, adaptability. Those qualities cannot be measured by simple metrics. She has proven it in ways you cannot ignore." The council fell silent again, tension thick in the room. Some members exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time, their authority seemed vulnerable to the undeniable truth. Her mother's voice trembled. "Lyra, we only wanted to protect you."
You were never meant to survive alone."
"I was abandoned," Lyra said quietly but firmly. "I was left to die because of your judgment, your fear, your misunderstanding of what humans are capable of. I am alive not because you were right, but because you were wrong." Her father's fists clenched, but he did not interrupt. He seemed paralyzed by the realization that his own assumptions had led to failure. The council chair, a tall man with a stern face, finally spoke. "You speak of survival and courage, yet the colony relies on order and measurable ability. Your words, though inspiring, cannot simply replace the rules that keep our society functioning." Lyra's gaze swept across the room. "The rules you rely on are outdated. They punish those who are different, discard those who do not fit narrow expectations. I am not asking to replace the rules. I am asking for recognition of human capability. Humanity is more than conformity. We endure, adapt, and rise above limitations. That is what I have proven. Outside the chamber, a small crowd of colonists had gathered. Their whispers grew louder, carried through open windows and data channels. Some had heard of her survival firsthand. Others had heard rumors. All were waiting to see the council's response. One council member, younger and less rigid, finally spoke. You survived, yes, but you cannot deny that your body remains weak. How do you propose to contribute to the colony, to justify your place here? Lyra smiled faintly. My body may be weak, but my mind is sharp. I have learned skills you will not teach in classrooms. I can navigate, analyze, plan, and protect. I have survived threats that would destroy many stronger than me. And I can teach these skills to others. My value is not in compliance, but in contribution. That is how humans thrive. That is how humanity expands. The murmurs grew louder. Kane watched closely, noting the subtle shift in energy. The council's rigidity was cracking. For the first time, they were confronted with a living example of the very qualities they claimed to admire, but had refused to recognize. Her father spoke again, voice quieter this time. If what you say is true, then perhaps I judged you too harshly. Lyra met his eyes, not with anger, but with clarity. You did. But this is not about punishment. It is about recognition. It is about seeing that humans are capable of more than you allowed yourself to believe. One council member, a man who had been silent until now, finally stood. We cannot deny her achievements. She has survived where we expected failure. She has demonstrated intelligence, resourcefulness, and courage beyond measure. Perhaps we need to reconsider how we measure human capability. Lyra felt a spark of hope. The council was not fully convinced, but the seed had been planted. Change was possible. Kane placed a hand on her shoulder. This is the beginning, he said. You've challenged their assumptions. Now you need to show them the full extent of what humans can do. Lyra nodded.
I will. Over the next hours, she demonstrated her skills to the council.
Using the settlement's data systems, she identified hidden dangers, predicted weather patterns, and even rerouted patrol drones to improve efficiency and safety. Each action was deliberate, showcasing not brute strength but intellect, strategy, and the human ability to adapt. By midday, whispers among the council turned to cautious respect. Some members leaned forward, taking notes, asking questions. Others still resisted, clinging to old prejudices, but they could not ignore the proof before them. Lyra was not weak. She was a human who had survived, learned, and excelled where others might have failed. Her family watched, conflicted emotions on their faces. Shame, pride, disbelief, and hope all mingled together. Lyra addressed them directly. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am asking for understanding. Recognize what humans can achieve even when we are underestimated. That is the lesson I bring. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. I see now. I was blind. Her father's jaw tightened, then relaxed slightly. You have shown us more than I imagined possible. I cannot undo the past, but I can acknowledge the truth now.
The council deliberated, voices low and careful.
Outside, colonists had gathered, drawn by rumors of the confrontation. Many had already taken sides, supporting Lyra openly. Some shouted encouragement, others watched quietly, absorbing the lesson she had brought. Survival, intelligence, and courage defined a human more than physical ability. After hours of tense discussion, the council finally reached a decision. Lyra would be officially reinstated in the colony, not as a mere survivor, but as a valued member, whose skills and insights would be shared for the benefit of all. She would lead training in survival, strategy, and problem-solving, abilities that went beyond what traditional rules considered important. Kane watched her receive the decision with quiet satisfaction. He had seen her growth, her courage, her intellect, and now the colony would too. Lyra's journey was far from over, but this victory marked a turning point, not just for her, but for the entire settlement. Her father approached her afterward, voice quieter than before. "I cannot change what I did, but I want to learn from you. Teach me what you know. Help me understand what it means to truly survive and thrive." Lyra considered him for a moment, then nodded. "I will teach you. But understand this. Survival is only the first step. To thrive, humans must challenge assumptions, adapt to challenges, and rise beyond limitations. That is what I have learned, and that is what I will show you." Her mother joined them, her hands trembling. "I will follow your lead. I want to see what I did not see before." The colony around them had shifted subtly. Fear and prejudice were giving way to curiosity and hope. Colonists whispered of Lyra's survival, of her courage, of the intelligence she had displayed. They began to realize that true human strength was measured not only in physical ability, but in adaptability, determination, and heart. Kane and Lyra spent the evening reviewing the settlement's systems, identifying areas where improvements could be made. They planned patrol routes, analyzed environmental hazards, and worked on strategies to improve efficiency and safety. Lyra's mind, honed by days of survival, thrived in this challenge. Kane watched in admiration, seeing how her intellect and courage inspired not only him, but potentially an entire colony. By nightfall, the council chamber was quiet. Lyra looked out over the settlement, the lights twinkling in the darkness. She had survived the fringe planet, faced storms, predators, isolation, and abandonment. And now she had faced the council itself. She had not only survived, but had begun to change perceptions of what humans were capable of. Kane joined her at the window. "Tomorrow, you'll teach them more. Show them what humans can endure, adapt to, and overcome. They've seen part of your strength. Now, it's time for the full measure." Lyra nodded, feeling a deep sense of purpose. "Yes, I will show them. Not for revenge, not for pride, but to prove what humans truly are capable of. Survival is just the beginning." Outside, the settlement lay quiet under the stars, but Lyra knew that the dawn of a new understanding had begun. Humanity's potential was limitless, and she had become a symbol of what could be achieved when courage, intelligence, and resilience were allowed to flourish. And she would continue to lead, to inspire, and to prove that humans could rise above any challenge, no matter how impossible it seemed. The sky over the settlement glowed with the first rays of dawn, painting the metal buildings in pale gold. Lyra stood at the edge of the observation deck, the wind tugging at her cloak and the cold biting at her cheeks. She could see the entire colony below, bustling with life, a place that had once judged her unfit and abandoned. Now it seemed smaller somehow, constrained by limits she had long since surpassed. Kane stood beside her, silent, watching the horizon. He had seen her growth, her courage, her mind sharpened by days of survival. He knew she was ready for more than the colony could offer. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked quietly. "Once we leave, there's no turning back. The stars are vast, and dangers are greater than anything we faced here." Lyra nodded, eyes fixed on the distant planets. "I've survived worse than fear and prejudice. I've survived storms, predators, isolation, and betrayal. The stars are just another challenge. And humanity deserves to see what we can achieve." They moved to the small exploration ship waiting at the edge of the colony, a sleek vessel designed for reconnaissance and quick travel. Lyra's hands brushed along the hull, remembering how her own ingenuity and determination had brought her this far. Kane piloted the ship with careful precision, checking systems, ensuring fuel reserves, and monitoring external conditions. The launch was smooth, the engines humming as the ship rose above the settlement, leaving behind the familiar and stepping into the unknown. Lyra pressed herself against the window, watching the planet shrink beneath them. Every rock, every icy plain, every memory of abandonment was now part of a story she could tell, a lesson in human endurance and brilliance. Their first challenge came sooner than expected. A rogue meteor storm appeared on their trajectory, small rocks moving at incredible speeds. Kane's hands flew over the controls, adjusting shields and navigating through the debris. Lyra quickly assessed their path, calculating angles, predicting movements, and identifying the safest trajectory. "We'll have a small gap near the fourth cluster," she said. "Turn slightly starboard, then rise sharply. You'll have to trust me." Kane glanced at her, surprised by the confidence in her voice. "Are you sure?" "I've calculated it," she replied. "It's our best chance." Together, they maneuvered through the storm. The ship rattled and shook as debris collided with the shields, but Lyra's predictions proved correct. The storm passed, leaving them in the calm expanse of space, hearts pounding, adrenaline surging. Kane allowed himself a small smile. "I'm impressed. You're more than survival skills. You think like a pilot, a strategist, a human who refuses to be limited."
Lyra laughed softly, exhausted but exhilarated. "I told you."
Strength is more than muscle. Their journey through the stars was both thrilling and perilous. Lyra's abilities became invaluable. She navigated through asteroid fields, predicted solar flares, and detected anomalies in the ship's systems before they became dangerous. Kane had seen countless pilots and soldiers falter in similar situations, but Lyra's mind worked differently. She adapted, improvised, and thrived. Days passed. They encountered abandoned stations, derelict ships, and signs of alien life. Some encounters were peaceful. Others required careful maneuvering. Each challenge allowed Lyra to demonstrate human ingenuity, her quick thinking often saving them from disaster. Kane watched, amazed by her capacity to adapt, her ability to remain calm under pressure, and the unwavering courage she displayed. One evening, as they drifted near a newly discovered planet, the ship's sensors detected a hostile signal. Alien ships, large and fast, moving toward their location. Kane went immediately to defensive protocols, preparing weapons and shields, but Lyra intervened.
"Don't react too quickly," she said. "Panic will get us killed."
"Observe their formation, their patterns. There's a flaw in their movement. If we act strategically, we can avoid conflict entirely." Kane hesitated, then nodded. He trusted her instincts, as he had learned to do. Lyra guided him through evasive maneuvers, calculated the timing of turns and thrusters, and used the stars themselves as cover. The alien ships passed without detecting them, leaving their ship untouched and their hearts racing. "You're incredible," Kane said, once the danger had passed. "I've never seen a human think like that under pressure." Lyra smiled faintly. "I told you, humans survive with brains and courage, not just strength. We adapt." They continued their exploration, encountering new worlds, strange phenomena, and challenges that tested both mind and body. Lyra taught Kane new methods of analysis, navigation, and survival in space. Kane, in turn, shared combat training, piloting strategies, and lessons in discipline. Together, they became a team where strength, intelligence, and resilience combined seamlessly. Their reputation began to grow. Messages sent to nearby colonies spoke of the unfit girl who had survived the fringe planet and now navigated the stars, unmatched in wit, strategy, and courage. Humans listened, inspired by the story, realizing that Lyra's journey was proof of what their species could accomplish when they refused to be constrained by prejudice or expectation. One day, while exploring a planet with a fragile atmosphere and shifting terrain, disaster struck. The ground beneath them began to collapse into a network of deep fissures. Kane's hands tightened on the controls, preparing for emergency maneuvers. Lyra, however, quickly assessed the planet's surface, noticing patterns and stable zones. "We can cross here," she said, pointing to a narrow but solid ridge.
It will hold the ship if we move slowly and evenly. Trust me."
Kane followed her instructions, guiding the ship with precision. Every move required exact calculations, every decision a test of nerve. Slowly, carefully, they navigated the treacherous surface, the fissures widening dangerously around them. When the ship finally cleared the unstable ground, both of them exhaled in relief. Lyra's mind had saved them again. "You never stop amazing me," Kane said, shaking his head. "You're not just surviving anymore. You're leading, teaching, and inspiring." Lyra looked out at the strange alien horizon. "That's what humans do. We don't just survive. We thrive, adapt, and rise above challenges. That's who we are." As they traveled deeper into uncharted space, Lyra began documenting everything they encountered. Alien life forms, strange planets, meteor patterns, and anomalies in star systems. All recorded for future exploration teams. Her work would allow humanity to venture further, safer, and with confidence. She was not merely surviving, she was expanding the boundaries of human knowledge and potential. One evening, as they floated near a massive nebula, Kane turned to her. "Lyra, look how far you've come. You were abandoned, left to die. And now look at you, mapping stars, teaching humans how to endure, survive, and thrive. You're extraordinary." Lyra smiled, her eyes reflecting the glowing colors of the nebula. "I was abandoned, yes, but humanity doesn't fail. We endure. We adapt. We rise. We rise. I only had to trust in what we are capable of." The days turned into weeks. They faced alien storms, gravitational anomalies, and equipment failures. But Lyra's mind and Kane's strength kept them alive. Every challenge reinforced the truth she had carried since the frozen plains. Humans were defined not by weakness or physical limits, but by courage, intelligence, and resilience. Finally, they reached a new system, rich with potential for colonies, resources, and research. Lyra gazed at the planets below, feeling the weight of her journey, the triumph of survival, and the promise of the future. "This is just the beginning," she said softly. "There are more worlds to explore, more challenges to face, and more humans to show what we can achieve." Kane placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "And you'll lead them. You'll show them the future of humanity." Lyra nodded, a smile spreading across her face. She thought of the frozen plains where she had been abandoned, the storms she had survived, and the council that had underestimated her. All of it had led to this moment. She was alive, strong in ways that mattered, and ready to push humanity forward. As they prepared to land on the new world, Lyra felt a deep sense of purpose. Humanity's journey among the stars was just beginning, and she would be at the forefront, guiding, teaching, and proving that humans could rise above any limitation. The ship touched down on the new planet's surface, engines humming softly. Lyra stepped out, breathing deeply. The air was thin but breathable, the terrain rugged but full of potential. She looked at Kane, who nodded encouragingly. "Ready?" he asked. "Always," she replied. Together they began to explore, catalog, and understand the new world. Each discovery, each challenge, each problem solved was a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. Lyra's journey had transformed her from a girl judged unfit for marriage into a symbol of humanity's limitless potential. Above them, the stars stretched endlessly, a reminder that the universe was vast, full of danger, opportunity, and the unknown. But Lyra no longer feared it. She had survived the worst, faced her fears, challenged authority, and proved the strength of the human spirit. And as she looked to the horizon, she knew one truth more than any other. Humanity would endure, adapt, and rise above every challenge. She would continue to lead, to inspire, and to show the galaxy what it meant to be human. The journey had begun with abandonment and fear, but it ended with hope, courage, and the unshakable belief that humans could conquer any frontier, survive any trial, and shine in the darkness of the stars. Lyra smiled, ready for the future, ready for humanity.